Hey everybody, welcome back. We've got a little bit of a different video. We're releasing it a day or two early because we've got some plans coming up that we're not going to be able to film at our normal time. We're also in a different location because there's all kinds of noise going on. When you do this in one take, it's difficult. So you're going to have wind chimes, a snoring bulldog, and some golfers out over there. But let's get to it. Gillian, we'll get into the word of the week here in a minute, but why don't you tell everybody how the prep is going, how it has gone this past week.
Okay, so I am currently 12 weeks out, or this Friday I will be 12 weeks out from the competition, and things are starting to get extremely real. Not that they weren't real before, but coming inside that window, and the last 10 weeks have passed very quickly. This was a highly, highly unusual week for me, and the reason is that, well, for both of us, is that I felt like I've been putting in the work and doing all of the work, and I don't feel like I am getting the same result.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had an extraordinary amount of life stress, which I know you're going to talk a little bit about.
A little bit.
And I am doing all of my training. I am eating all of my food, nailing all of the macros, and I have been watching, I mentioned it on an Instagram post earlier this week or last week, I've actually been watching my scale weight climb and experiencing a little bit of digestion stuff and abdominal bloating, which I think is one of the, well, two primary reasons. One of them is absolutely stress related to the stuff that we have going on in our life right now. And the second is hormonal for me. So I am a woman approaching 50, and my hormones are starting to change a little bit, and I've been losing some body fat, and my menstrual cycle has changed.
Because who doesn't want to talk about that on YouTube?
And I have been dealing with some PMS symptoms for about 2 weeks. So
We have been dealing with those symptoms.
Okay, that is very, very fair. So my body has actually been kind of acting very crazy if we were looking at the metric of scale weight alone.
Right.
However, I mean, I am obviously getting leaner as evidenced in measurements.
And the pictures.
And the pictures and videos,
Yep.
but it has been absolutely maddening to watch my scale weight climb. And what's so difficult is, as a fitness professional, I am well aware of the dozen or more factors that goes into scale weight.
Coach thyself.
Yes, I know my menstrual cycle impacts that. I know hydration. I know that sleep. And so many things impact that, yet I still struggle to keep putting in the work and watching things kind of going, and my thought is, oh no, is my coach going to cut my food, or, you know, what's going to happen, and what am I not doing right? And I am, that's Lucy.
That's Lucy.
And for the past 10 days or so, I am fighting the instinct, which is to do more and override that. And what I mean by do more is, like, I need to do more exercise or do more cardio or eat less.
Right.
And I have exercised, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of self-control in sticking to the program,
Right.
going over it with my coach, understanding that the process is not necessarily going to be linear, and just riding it out. But it has been challenging. What has it been like on your end?
Word of the week is frustration. So I'm not on a prep. So I'm doing basically lifestyle stuff. And I don't have the consequences that Gillian has riding on this. Like we talked about in the last video, I think it was, consequences, accountability, and trust. I mean, my consequences are basically self-induced, and that is a golf cart you might be hearing in the background. So we had a big tropical storm roll through here. It brought a lot of rain and a lot of humidity with high temperatures. And when you live in North Carolina, one of the things you deal with is mold. So we've been dealing with homeowners insurance, which categorically denied that there was anything that they would cover. We've had contractors in and out of the house almost every day for the past week, and the estimates are going to start rolling in. So we've had some work done, but the rest I can hear the cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So, but I mean, this is it's the benefits of home ownership and the glories of all of that. So there's been some frustration on Gillian's side from the diet perspective, or I shouldn't say the diet perspective, but from the numerical results perspective.
So I think the other thing is that when you decide you're going to prep, you almost want life to exist in essentially this vacuum and not have all of these additional stressors. And we've had other ones that are probably, I don't know that we're going to discuss here, not that, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden these other stressful things start coming in the way, and you're like, oh, I didn't plan on this during the prep. Like,
Right.
for instance, right now we have people that are coming and going from the home throughout the day,
Right.
and my workspace and prep space is somewhat disrupted.
And I think it's weekends. We coached a memorial workout this past weekend for Lazar Djukic, a CrossFit athlete who died during the CrossFit Games. So, I mean, and Gillian's a former competitor at the CrossFit Games, so that actually extracted a pretty emotional toll. So, I mean, it's little things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to come up in a prep, but have pretty significant impact especially when you're going through all the things that she was talking about before.
So I think what we've realized this week is one of the more challenging things, again, going through a fairly stressful time in our life, some stuff going on with friends and family, as well as what's going on at the house, and recognizing that during the prep, we do not have the same coping strategies, or I do not have the same coping strategies that I had used previously. Right. So by coping strategies, after a really, really rough day, or you find out that your house is completely covered in mold.
It's not completely covered, but just upstairs, there's a couple of rooms.
And that insurance is going to do nothing about it. It might be nice to pour a glass of wine, or to be like, you know what? I don't want to eat my whatever food. Let's just go out to dinner.
It's called comfort food for a reason.
Yes. And recognizing that right now during prep, those things for me are not available. I made myself one promise, and that is what has driven me to stay on plan. When I get on stage on November 15th, regardless of what my placing is, whether I come in first and win the show, or whether I come in dead last, which we'll talk about one day. I've had that experience too. I want to say that I gave my absolute best.
Maybe not the best, but her best.
The best that I can do.
Right.
And I knew this week, or last weekend, when I was like, I would really like to have a glass of wine right now, that when I reflected on that moment on November 15th, again, regardless of my placement, that I do the best that I could, I would know that I had made that choice. So that is what, for me, has kept me on path with being able to continue to make the right choices, recognizing the place that something like having a drink or an indulgent meal had in our life, and breaking those patterns. So again, I think we had mentioned once before that we started to enjoy the occasional afternoon or early evening cocktail when COVID started, and we did not...
Only on days that ended in DAY.
And we didn't really break that habit until the beginning of this prep. Right. So what's it been like for you?
So... Again, I'm more doing lifestyle type things, and we've already said it. Life happens. So I retired from the Marine Corps, but I went back to work. And when you are at work, sometimes there are work functions. And last week or a week and a half ago or so, we had a work lunch, and of course we went to a Mexican restaurant, which was delicious and amazing. And I did my best to make good, solid choices, like, hey, do no harm. And then tomorrow at work, as a thank you, we've got a couple of people who are going to be bringing in some lunch for the entire team. And Gillian actually taught me a very important thing a while ago, and we have so many rule number ones.
I think we coined that term before someone else did.
It could be, but hey, when it comes to food, don't be a weirdo. If somebody brings in a cake for your birthday, don't be a weirdo and be like, oh, thanks, no thanks. Especially if you're doing lifestyle stuff. Yeah. If you're doing lifestyle stuff, thank you. And clearly, if you're allergic, that's a completely different story. But I'm not allergic to cake. I kind of like it. So, but when there's my turn, when there's a life function, especially at work, I'm going to go do that. I just try not to do a lot of harm. I try to make really good choices. So, my scale weight has bounced around a little bit, and I think most of mine has been, the stress and frustration we point this way from the house. So, but I think that's more than I've ever said on all the videos combined. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I was just going to point out that your choices, you can have those choices, and you could have that piece of cake or indulge in a work lunch, because 95% of the time, other than that, you're making
Right.
the right choice. And while you might indulge in, Mexican food for lunch, you're going to come home and you're going to get
Get
right,
right
back
back on
your
track.
plan
Yep.
at dinner. And I know for some of it, for you, we have sort of had to separate some things, like any aspect of guilt that you might have over maybe you choose to have a drink on a day that I don't.
Right.
Or maybe you get to eat something that I'm not also getting to eat, which I am, and I'm going to say it here, and I'm going to say it to my husband. I could not be more grateful that you are going through this process with me and supporting me in this in a way that I have never experienced and never been supported before.
I have no choice. Send cake. I'm kidding. But I mean, that's the good part about for me, the consequences are a little bit lower. So I don't stress about that, and I can exercise the nutritional amnesia that we talked about. And it also helps keep me kind of above the panic hangry threshold. So when
We talked about that.
Gillian is a little stressed out, I can sort of regulate things a little bit to an extent.
So what we did talk about as we continue on through this cut and the final 12 weeks of it, that at a certain point, Scott will come off of the cut and shift into maintenance. Because he is going to need all of the brain cells and all of his faculties to best support me.
Right.
So the short of this week is I am continuing to stick to the plan. My body is starting to respond again.
Absolutely.
I had about
and you can see it. If you watch our videos on Facebook or Instagram or anything, you can see the changes happening week by week. Just you don't see the scale weight. Her coach sees the scale weight. She sees the scale weight, and that's a little bit of the frustration.
I had about a 10-day period of time that was very, very challenging.
Yep.
And again, I think this is helpful because I can tell you that doing this for a living, this is something that I encounter at some point with every single client that is cutting.
Well, to include me too, because I mean, in my previous life in the Marine Corps, I would have to make weight, and I would go through cuts, and I just wouldn't understand. Like, I'm doing all the right things. Why is the scale going up? There's an infinite number of reasons why it is, but the point that I think you've made very clearly is stay with the plan.
Yep.
Don't do too much.
Yep.
Don't do too little. Stay with the plan, and this is where that trust comes in. Have someone you trust, whether it's a coach or
and collect data.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to stop weighing myself because it was absolutely maddening. I'm like, I don't want to get on scale.
We'll fix
because
that problem.
It would devastate me. But I recognize that having that data, providing that data to my coach, tracking my scale weight along with my menstrual cycle, tracking it along with sleep, tracking it along was all helpful information. And then we could see patterns and trends and all of that stuff. So every fiber of me has not wanted to get on that scale, for the past week or so, and I have forced myself to get on it and realize that it doesn't say anything about who I am as a person. It is just another data point.
Or quite frankly, it doesn't say anything about how you're going to place in your competition.
It does not.
So, I mean, bodybuilding, the competition that she specifically chose, has nothing to do with scale weight.
My weight is irrelevant to that.
Right. But it's a tangible metric, and it's frustrating to see. So, you want me to ask you the question?
Sure.
Okay. I don't even know that she knows what question I'm talking about. So we, on a walk or somewhere, we came up with just something we did want to talk about. So, I mean, there's no notes, no phone. She didn't write questions for me. This is actually a question we came up with. And there's a point to it. So what do you, Miss Gillian, think is your greatest athletic achievement? And yes, you can have two.
That was my first question that I asked you, but I do have two. But I think for the purpose of this video today, I am going to focus on the one that was probably most recent in my life.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, well, I guess
it is your opinion because I asked her the question.
My opinion of me. It was
one take, folks.
So, my greatest athletic achievement for me was when I set the world record for push-ups in 2016. So I know I've spoken a bunch about it before. Not everybody that I'm talking to here is familiar with it, but in 2016, I did 1,190 push-ups in 1 hour and set the world record. I actually broke the previous world record for women by, I think it was roughly 200 push-ups. And
I don't even know that I could do 200 push-ups in an hour, but okay.
so it wasn't so much for me what that was. It was so much less about the physical, because at the time I think I was just short of my 40th birthday. And this was, and I'll talk about this on another video, why push-ups were so personal and important to me, and how this was something I was thinking of actually for a couple of decades before deciding to do it. And I was like, what difference am I really making? I am, and approaching a middle-aged woman that just wants to go do push-ups. It's not a sport. It's not a competition based on, any other standards of competitions. So what difference does it make? And I was like, I know that this is something I want to do, but I want to tie it to something greater.
Right.
And so what I did was I partnered with the Carteret County Public School Foundation.
That's our local county where we live.
And I raised funds for physical education in our local schools. But what was more important than raising funds was I want to get the message of physical fitness and health education out there and get young people moving. So along with my decision to set the push-up record was basically a full-scale initiative of bringing physical fitness, body weight exercises, activity, to elementary school and middle school children. So during the time, which was about 5 months that I trained for the push-ups, I actually made over 60 school visits and taught some lessons in PE, got a whole bunch of people moving, and additionally was sort of on a fundraising trip, old-fashioned, not like what we see on the internet. I was asking to come basically before any group of people and give my pitch and help raise money for our physical education in our public schools. But I think what made it the most unique athletic accomplishment was that I had nothing to look to. I had no script before me. I am going to do this thing that nobody else has done or very few people have done, and how do I train for this? How do I train for something where there's no handbook? How do I train for something where I can't hire a coach? And I had to draw back on the data that I have collected on myself. I have also mentioned and talked about it other times before that I started keeping a logbook of my exercise and activity when I was in 5th grade. Yep. So in 1987. So I set the push-up record in 2016. And, I was able to reflect back on roughly that amount of data and understanding that I was basically for this process going to be essentially my own experiment.
And I've heard this story before, so I know she knows the answer to this question. But when you first started, what did you think you were going to do right out of the gate?
So I knew that it was going to be a very, very public thing. So at the time that I set the push-up record, I opened the whole house up. I did it at the gym that I owned. We had all of the cameras rolling, and I invited the general public. We streamed it live on Facebook, and a number of the schools that I had previously done school visits also streamed it. So I did this very, very big public thing, which looks like I'm doing again. And what was my question?
What did you think you were going to do out of the gate?
So I wanted to come out and just impress people. So again, it's an hour's time. So I was able to take breaks during this. And I was like, you know what? I want to get out there and I want to do at least 200 straight push-ups out of the gate. Because who's going to be impressed if I break it up into tiny little bits?
But what ended up happening?
I ended up doing 10 push-ups every 30 seconds, 10 absolutely perfect push-ups every 30 seconds for an hour, falling short of that time in the very last couple of minutes, because if I had hit that time, I would have been at 1,200.
So I do just want to jump in and say one thing real quick. When Gillian does a push-up, it is the standard. It is chest to ground and then arms at full lockup all the way up. And not just below 90. I mean, she goes all the way down and all the way up for a perfect rep of 1. And then she did it 1,189 more times.
Yes.
So it's not just, people out there, doing push-ups with their neck and their head. I mean, this was full, straight back, everything.
And I think learning how with that, another example of pushing my ego aside, hey, I may not be giving these people a show, and I'm going to be doing this intense through the whole thing. But it took several months to figure out this strategy and a ton of data collection and just the amount of tests I would run on myself, and a lot of them failed. But what a lot of people don't know that day, and it's where it's you only remember certain pieces of it, I actually failed to set the pull-up record just minutes before setting the push-up record.
Which you were trying to do most pull-ups in 1 minute.
Most consecutive pull-ups in 1 minute, yes. And the crazy thing about that was they were strict dead hang pull-ups and not kipping.
Right.
So most dead hang pull-ups in 1 minute. So I got it in my crazy head that I wanted to break 2 world records on one day, minutes apart. So as the entire event opened, I started out with pull-ups and I actually failed. Like, I could not control my body movement, and I think I was swinging all over the place, and it wouldn't have even counted, put it that way. Even if I had hit the number and I fell short of the mark by 2, I needed 2 more to break the record, but I needed 1 more to tie the record. But I am fairly certain if anybody goes to the videotape that those pull-ups would have not counted.
Right.
So I came from an epic fail in front of, I don't know how many people were watching. I would like to think in the thousands, but who knows how many people were.
Tens of people.
Well, the gym itself had several hundred in attendance that were watching, and I failed. Right out of the gate, I failed. And I think for me, my ability, to put that behind me and just to be able to move on to the push-ups, and I think knowing, much like with this show, that whatever the outcome is, for me with that, I went on and I successfully set the world record for push-ups, but I had won no matter what. No matter what, I had been to more than 60 schools.
Right.
No matter what, I had raised a substantial amount of funds for public school education. And I think the lesson, I was worried. I'm like, what if people see me not do this? Like, what if I get out there and don't do it? But that's part of life.
So she always talks about the power of one.
Yes.
I can do one, I can do another. But a different take on the power of one. What happened at Walmart?
So I think the most meaningful thing to me about setting the push-up record had nothing to even do with breaking the record, and it was the impact. I was at Walmart. At this point, I don't remember if it was several weeks or maybe a month after, and a boy and his family just started walking towards me and got down on the floor of Walmart and started doing push-ups. Just right there. I'm in Walmart, I'm kind of by myself in there, and it was the most moving thing to me to know that, people were taking this lesson, going home, moving with their family. So that, to me, I'm like, even if I hadn't set the record, the idea that
changed
somebody,
at least one person's life.
And somebody was going home and being active, but back to one life to change is so immense, even if it only changes one life.
Right.
And when I talk about one, that's where it's sort of relevant to what I'm doing now, is the push-ups I always saw as just one. So do one perfect push-up and it's behind me. If I wrapped my mind around doing 1,190 push-ups and thought, I still have 1,180 to go, I don't know that I could have gotten through it. So it was almost like I do one, I can always challenge myself to take one step. I could always challenge myself to take the next step and do it to the very, very best of my abilities. And for the push-ups, like, I chose with that a movement that most people can do if they train.
Right.
Because it's like I could always do one, and then you could do one more, and then you could do one more. And how I see that relevant to the contest prep is contest prep is really just about that series of one more step, one more step, one more step, one more meal, one more workout, one more cardio session, one more posing session. No one of those things is that difficult when by itself. It's when you start kind of freaking out about how monumental they all are.
So break it down.
Yeah. So that is what sort of has, reflecting on that experience has helped me through this, because especially a week like this when things start to feel like they're getting really, really hard, I'm like, no, Gillian, just conquer your next meal.
Right.
Get through your next meal. You can do this. You can make the right choice here.
And then put it behind you and do it all over again. Although we hope not to have to renovate the house room by room all over again. But all right, I think that went pretty well. Better than this week has gone. So we're coming up on just about 24 and a half minutes. Shall we wrap it up and thank the folks?
Yes. Thank you again for sticking it out with us. Again, 12 weeks out. We will be back in 2 weeks. We have yet to get there, but we've talked about it. We've got a couple of questions to answer in that next video. We're going to talk about training. and we're going to talk about nature versus nurture.
There we go. All right. And as always, please don't forget to like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications for future content that's coming out. We really, really appreciate everybody watching these, and there have been a few people who have reached out to us that have just absolutely blown us away that you're watching and following, and it means the world to us. So thank you for that, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Bye.